Hey everyone, happy Thursday to you. I am so glad that I'm starting to hear from some of my friends in the Helene struck areas. Starting to hear that some of them are coming back to life, some of them are getting signal. So that's wonderful. Still haven't heard from a lot of my friends though, and that worries me, of course. But of course, they're in my prayers. We still have hundreds of people missing. And, I'm not friends with all of them, but I'm sure somebody is. So I'm sure that they're in prayers as well. Please lift up your prayers on their behalf. And let's be hopeful that we've got some rescue teams that are going to start to deploy down there like they have with previous disasters. And let's start getting some lives back to normal for those people. I certainly hope that will happen. Medical supplies, I'm hearing, are in dire need. Water, of course, is in dire need. That goes along with medical preparedness as well. And I've been reading some really interesting stories about people's spiritual struggle and their mental struggle as to who to help and who not to open their heart to, just to be safe. That's why the spiritual preparedness and the mental preparedness are your first and second principle. You've really got to make those decisions ahead of time and not be plagued with survivor's guilt, for lack of a better word. I know it's easier said than done, but there's got to be some legitimate work that goes on there spiritually and mentally. So review those 10 principles of preparedness. Make sure that you don't have any gaping holes in your preparedness efforts. That doesn't mean that you have everything A-okay, but at least the first 3 or 4 principles you can have down without spending money. And you want to make sure that you are right with the Lord on your first principle and your own conscience, your true north compass, and that you have the mental fortitude that you need and the knowledge and skill sets that you need, which is your second principle. So today we're going to talk about what's going on with all this TP buying. And I've got some facts for you. I took a lot of heat yesterday with these 2 infographics that I posted, even from some people that I was really surprised that they gave me some flack. So I thought that I would just give you some facts, let you make some decisions on your own based on that, and we'll just go from there. I thought it was really interesting, some things that we didn't understand about exporting. I say we, I mean, I'm included. I didn't understand some of the ramifications of the ports being closed. It's just a very interesting world out there. It doesn't matter if you are sharing information with people of your same faith. It seems like people need to simmer down a little bit and maybe do some of their own research before they start with the name calling. But today's more about let's find out what's really going on, and let's see for ourselves what's really going on so that we can be properly prepared. We don't need to panic, and none of the information I put out there is to be panicked. It's just to be prepared, to be well informed. And so let's do that today. I've got some sources to share with you as well, so that you can check on your own. I'm not some great Maharaja when it comes to research. I just spent the time doing the research because this is what I do. So I want the information that I put out there to be reliable. That doesn't mean I'm infallible by any stretch of the imagination, but the first reason for the TP buying, and it's certainly what I put at the headline when I posted the first infographic, is panic buying. But you got to understand the panic buying, because so many people do not want to relive what they went through with COVID, and it's still fresh on their minds. They do not want to go through that again. And they remember what it was like to not know where they were going to get TP. I mean, you think that the basic essentials of providing for your family are food, but TP is right up there as well. They don't want to dehumanize themselves and have to use leaves and things of that nature. And we are not a country that has embraced bidets or alternative methods that I won't discuss because it grosses me out, that they do in other nations. The U.S. is the largest importer of toilet paper in the world. Now, some of you may go, that can't be because we've got Georgia Pacific and we have Procter and Gamble and we have Kimberly-Clark, and in Lewiston, Idaho, they're the largest manufacturer of toilet paper for name brands like Kroger and Costco, and that's a fact. That is a fact. But guess what, guys? We don't get to tell these companies whether or not they're allowed to export their goods. And they certainly are allowed to export their goods. If they want to export their goods for reasons that we'll discuss, they can. And so we import toilet paper. Now, here's the interesting thing, though. We're the largest exporter of toilet paper in the world, but it only represents 7.5% of our toilet paper usage. 7.5%. Now, that's saying a lot. That's saying that we're huge mega consumers versus the rest of the world. That 7.5% that we bring in represents 9.5% of the entire global production. So I found that very interesting. And you can, let me give you the source here. OEC World Report is where I got a lot of my statistics from, and they will break it down to you for you by year. They will break it down for you by which country you're getting the imports from. But OEC World Report is a great deal of the information. I had one person, it was really funny, name call me for saying such an atrocious thing and say, give me your source. And so I did provide my source. And then they said, oh, well, that's just a bunch of misinformation. You should listen to me. And I thought that was funny. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to listen to Dan because Dan's the man. And I just thought that was funny. I mean, what's the purpose of research if we're not supposed to believe in any of the research that we do? Usually there's two sides of research. I did not find that in this case. Everybody hands down all the reports that I was finding was saying that the U.S. by far is the largest importer of toilet paper. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean we need to panic because, like I said, there's only 7.5% of our toilet paper coming in. And not only that, but the first place we're getting our TP from is Canada. So, and I just to be on the safe side, I'm like, okay, but do we need to import it? Does it need to come around somewhere because of where in Canada it's coming from? No, it's coming right over the border via trucks and over the Great Lakes. So no, it's the pulp, the sources and the TP sources where we're getting it. They're actually really close to the border. So no, we don't have a problem there. It's most of it's coming from Canada. Second place we're getting it from is Mexico. Third place we're getting it from, though, is China. And the fourth place we're getting it from is Indonesia. So yes, there's some bugaboo, but that shouldn't be enough to interrupt our flow, so to speak. I just think it's the panic buying because people do not want to go through what they went through with COVID. Now, having said that, I talked to a really nice couple at Costco yesterday, and normally I would have said something, and I'm so glad that I didn't. I'm glad I asked a question first instead of making an accusation. Whew, thank goodness I don't have to repent of that one. They had one of those big, large plank carts loaded up with toilet paper. And it was the expensive kind because that's all there was. There wasn't any of the name brand or the no name brand left, the Costco brand. And I asked them what they were doing. I said, hey, what are you guys planning for? And they were headed down south to help out victims of Hurricane Helene. Now, you want to hear some interesting things. So on TikTok yesterday, there was a guy who was actually handing out tips to his delivery people with toilet paper. And that was Bloomberg reported on this. The video went viral. The man was tipping people with rolls of toilet paper instead of cash. And there was even a wave of toilet paper crime. In North Carolina, for instance, the sheriff deputies found a stolen tractor trailer carrying 18,000 pounds of bathroom tissue. And then in Florida, police arrested a man for stealing 66 rolls from the Marriott Hotel. There's a surge of a number of price gouging investigations that also have been focused on the exploitation of desperate shoppers. Some chain stores, for example, have reportedly demanded as much as $10 a roll, which that's a no-no. That's price gouging, and we don't believe in that in the Americas. So along with $26 thermometers, which I thought was interesting, and $40 for a single pair of face masks. So people are reverting back to their COVID days. They think crises, here we go again, and they've got a little bit of that PTSD going on. So let's just be a little understanding of that, try as we might. I mean, we're preparedness people. We should already be prepared. We should have enough toilet paper on hand because of COVID. We shouldn't have to go through that again. So that's the first thing. And then, of course, like I said, some people are helping people down south. Now, having said that, there's some information that I want us to have, because I think that it explains a lot of some of the other things that were on the list, on the comprehensive list that I published, that maybe some people don't know, because some people were dubious of some of the things on that list. And frankly, when I came across some of the things on the list, I was dubious, and I wouldn't have put them on the list if I hadn't done a little bit of homework. Some of them had me scratching my head going, really? Don't we do enough of that here? But the whole notion that just because a country produces or is known for producing a certain product doesn't mean they don't export that product. So first of all, the good news is not all of the ports along the east and Gulf coasts are going to be impacted, by the way. In fact, the longshoremen do work on the Great Lakes, but they're not striking. There are a couple of ports in New York that are still going to be open. Cleveland, Ohio port isn't going to be impacted. Hallelujah. So not all of them are going to be impacted. So are some of these that aren't going to, are they going to try to take the overflow? They're going to do their best, but you do have a logistics nightmare. It's the same thing if they're going to try to divert to the west, you have a logistics nightmare. And we're going to talk about why Asia is going to the East Coast and the Gulf Coast, why 52% of Asian imports are going over there. We'll actually talk about that, because that was one of the things that I had people question me on. So here's an interesting fact, and I wanted to bring this up because I've seen, and even for myself, I know how much I'm prepared for in terms of the number of rolls of toilet paper for a year. Well, according to this statistic that I read, and I read it in several places, it was in the 140 something range. Americans use the equivalent of 144 Charmin Mega rolls per person per year. Now, if it's a cat, it's more, because, so if it's a miniature Schnauzer Chihuahua mix, it's somewhere in between that 144 Charmin rolls and a cat. Somewhere in the middle there. Yes, you naughty girl. Anyway, so I thought that was interesting, because I know I was planning on 60 rolls. And so I'm a far cry from having enough. I know another friend of mine, they were saying we've got 522 rolls, but knowing how many kids that they have, that won't get them through a year if that statistic is correct. So what I suggest is, when you put a new roll on your toilet paper, that just inside the tube, you write the date on that roll, and you keep track of that for a month, not for a week, but for a month, and see what your average usage actually is. If you haven't already done that. So make sure that you're right on target with what your usage actually is, and make sure that you're consistently buying the same kind of toilet paper that you're planning on using when it comes time for preparedness, because you may call that a luxury item. I do agree that it's a luxury item. It's a luxury item that I'm willing to take up space for, though, and I'm willing to take up money for. There's just the ick factor, and I don't do really well with ick factors. I mean, I don't mind healing a wound. That's an ick factor, but there's some other ick factors I don't do so well with. So that's one of them. Obviously you can, break down, cloths and do the family cloth method. There's other options, and leaves in the woods, and being sure that you know which leaves are safe to use on your behind. That's important too. But it's it's only going to last so long, is what I'm getting at. But I'd like it to last as long as possible. My whole thing is prepare for a year. Prepare for a year. Maybe my trauma won't come until that year is up, when I have to start using leaves or family cloth or something of that nature. But if that's your purpose, if you want to be prepared for a year with toilet paper, then that's what you're going to want to do, is make sure that you have a year supply, and you make sure that you are realistic with what that year supply is. Okay, so the question that was asked quite a bit is, don't we produce enough TP here in the US? We do, if it all stayed here, but it's a lot like our wheat and our construction supplies and many other farming products. We end up importing those products, even though we produce a great deal of them. That being said, like I said, only 7.5% of our TP is imported, but that represents a huge portion of the market, that 9.5%. But we do import from Mexico and Canada, so we can, our fears can be allayed. Now, having said that, China, Germany, and the EU are the largest exporters of TP, which is interesting because I don't think I've ever seen TP that was China made. Maybe I'm spoiled. I get the soft stuff. I either get the Costco brand or the Charmin. I like those. There's some kinds that are better for the kind of tank that I have than others, according to the plumbers that I've talked to. And my father, who is meticulous in these kind of things, he's very maniacal about what kind of toilet paper you use because of the sewage system. So you may want to keep that in mind as well, especially if you get to a point where you're having to flush the toilet just with a water bottle or a bucket. It may not be as powerful as what you're using now. So you may want to keep that in mind and find out what kind of system you use and what toilet paper is best for that system. So I was curious about what else on that list. I'm not going to go through the whole list. I'm just going to hit a few things. What else on that list does the U.S. import heavily? If you haven't seen the list, go to Preparedness Pro on Facebook. You'll see the list there. It's a dark blue with a list of items. It says comprehensive list of items impacted by the port strike. Look on that list, you'll see the items that I came across in my research. I researched hundreds of articles, economic studies, etc., that we were to believe are impacted by the strike. Now, that's not a complete list, because there's over 100 food categories that are going to be impacted by the strike. I just posted the ones that I felt people would be most familiar with and most concerned about. So let's find out what else the U.S. imports in copious amounts. Paper products as a whole. The U.S. is the number 2 importer in the world. And that's saying a lot, since the number 1 is China. And of course, China is the number 1 importer of paper products, paper plates specifically. I looked up paper plates specifically to see if maybe we imported more paper plates than China, but no, we're number 2 for paper plates. And then the reason being is that, their population is significantly bigger than ours. We actually import a lot of our paper plates from China, Thailand, and Vietnam, according to the OEC World Report, which I thought was interesting because China is the largest importer of paper plates, but we import our paper plates from China, Thailand, and Vietnam. So I thought that was interesting. U.S. is also the largest importer of seafood in the world. Excuse me, they're not the largest. They're the 3rd largest. Excuse me. So 3rd largest there. The Netherlands are way up there, of course. And in spot 1 or 2, I can't remember who the number 2 spot was. Netherlands are the number 1 spot. The U.S., depending on what year you're looking at, I had a lot of people question poultry, because this is America, heart of America, farming, etc. But we are either the 2nd or the 3rd largest importer of poultry in the world, depending on, and we're not just talking 7.5%, folks. We're talking a lot. Depending on what year you're looking at, we keep trading places with 2 different countries. So second and third largest importer of poultry. That's going to leave a mark. I don't think we're going to see 99 cents a pound poultry specials anytime soon. So I'm planning on getting a couple of $1.49 a pound whole chickens and putting them in my roaster and slow cooking them there with 3 or 4 of them in the roaster at a time, and then canning them, just so that I make sure that I've got chicken for my recipes. We are the 4th largest importer of cocoa, and you can guess which countries are the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Who do you think when you think chocolate? So you'd probably be right. But the 4th largest importer of cocoa. So those items that are on that list are significant. They're not as insignificant as TP. Paper plates are pretty significant. We import more paper plates than we do TP by a long shot. So just FYI, kind of sobering thoughts to think how long this strike will go. Again, I remind you that in 77, they shut down the ports for 3 months over an 80 cent an hour raise. And this time around, we are talking about a 77% increase. And we have somebody who is spilling excessive rhetoric, who I think is more interested in being famous for his rhetoric than coming to terms with a good contract. That's my judgment call on the situation. That's how I'm looking at it. Okay, so another one of the questions that I got is, why is Asia delivering to the East ports? Well, I mean, some of it's just plain geography. We're talking Asia as a whole here, but the East ports, particularly those on the East Coast in the US, receive imports from Asia for a lot of reasons. For one, it's because of the expansion of the Panama Canal. The widening of the canal in 2016 allowed for larger ships to pass through, making it much more feasible. It's a cost issue for Asian cargo to reach the East Coast ports directly. And the reason why that's important is because of cost effectiveness. In some cases, it can be more cost effective to ship goods directly to the East Coast rather than unloading them on the West Coast and transporting them across the country by rail or truck. Water is still the cheapest way for cargo. Thank goodness. I mean, if it wasn't, our cost of goods would go way up, considering how globally dependent we are. I mean, they're up high enough as it is, but if we had to get everything primarily through rail or truck, that was the bulk of the travel, then things would be significantly more expensive. Also, another issue is market proximity. Based on what I just told you about the cost effectiveness, you've got many major consumer markets, of course, are located in the eastern United States. I mean, New York's one of the biggest cities, or if not the biggest city. So shipping directly to the East Coast can reduce overall transportation time and costs. Remember, us folks over here on the East Coast and Midwest, we're a just-in-time economy too, just like those in the Western and mountainous states. Port congestion is another reason. Your West Coast ports can sometimes experience congestion, but if we were to divert all the Asian imports over there, it wouldn't work. I mean, it's not just some of the Asian imports that come over here. It's 52% of the Asian imports that come over here to the East Coast. So sometimes that congestion will lead shippers to seek better routes, alternative routes. You also have risk diversification. Any person who's in business, who runs a business, they're going to look at risk diversification. So companies often prefer to have multiple shipping options to mitigate those risks. Anything associated with relying on one single route or one single set of ports is not wise. And then you have the Suez Canal route. Asian shipments reach the East Coast via the Suez Canal and across the Atlantic, which can be more efficient for certain regions and destinations. Another thing that I took some flack about, and I can understand because when I saw this, I was like, huh? Soybeans? So let's talk soybeans. The U.S. is actually an importer of soybeans. This year, we're supposed to have an excess crop by a lot, but in spite of the drought, which I found very interesting. But the U.S., they're not in the top 5. They're not even in the top 10, but they're the 24th largest importer of soybeans, in spite of the fact that we produce so many soybeans in this market. Still, it's something, the fact that we do still import soybeans. What form? What form do we import? What form do we export? What form do we grow? I don't know. I did not go down that rabbit hole. But I do know that one of the economists that I researched said that soybeans could be in short supply. So there you have it. Wasn't one of the most obvious shortages on that list, in my opinion, but it did come up, so I put it down there. Let's talk rice. This was really interesting for me. I didn't realize that the U.S. produced as much rice as it does, to be honest with you. I just thought it all came from China or wherever. But the U.S. imports 25% of its rice. And the majority of U.S. rice imports come from Asia, with over 60% of the imports being the aromatic varieties like your jasmine. The jasmine comes from Thailand, and the basmati comes from India and Pakistan. The U.S. also imports non-aromatic long grain rice from South America. By the way, I was at both Costco and Sam's Club yesterday doing a little due diligence, and Sam's Club had the best price on long grain. Their price on the 50-pound bag was significantly better than the price on the 25-pound bag at Costco. So just FYI. I mean, I'm not saying their 50-pound bag was less expensive than the 25-pound. I'm saying 225 pounds was more expensive than their 50-pound bag. So just FYI. Medium and short grain rice from China and Australia. Who knew that Australia was an exporter of rice? I had no idea. They are the 3rd largest importer of rice in the world, behind China and Iran, meaning the U.S. is, or the Philippines, depending on which report you read and which year. Now, isn't that interesting? You would think China and the Philippines. I mean, I lived in the Philippines. I remember seeing rice growing everywhere and rice being farmed everywhere. They would sweep it on the concrete as they would turn it over so that it would dry properly in the sun. I mean, that was just a way of life. And yet the countries that you would think of producing the items that are the largest are the countries that you would think of producing the items are the largest importers. So you think of China, the Philippines as rice exporters, right? But they're the largest importers of rice. See, in the U.S., we don't get to tell Procter & Gamble and Kimberly-Clark or Georgia Pacific who they have to sell their products to. If they want to export it for a better profit, they're allowed to. And by so doing, the U.S. has to import a small portion of their toilet paper, for example. So let's talk about production versus importing. This phenomenon, if you will, where countries import products that they're known for producing is quite common in global trade. In the case of, we'll just stick with toilet paper for a second, since that's what we're talking about today. The United States, there's several reasons for this, we'll call it a paradox. Price competition. So imported TP can be cheaper due to lower production costs in other countries. It's the same with clothing and shoes, even with transportation costs factored in. But then you also have market segmentation. So different brands or qualities, I should say, of TP cater to various consumer preferences and price points. Some imported brands may fill specific market niches. And we definitely see that. You know, not everybody who went looking for toilet paper went to Costco or Sam's Club. They went to Dollar Tree or Dollar General. And that's where their price points are that they wanted to spend on toilet paper. Corporate structure. You have multinational companies, and they may produce in one country and import to another based on their global supply chain strategies. I mean, that's all strategy to them. Production capacity. Despite being a large producer, domestic production might not meet the entire demand of their country, especially during consumption spikes. And we have those. The Philippines has them, especially depending on what kind of weather they get hit with. China's the same way. Trade agreements are another reason for this happening. Favorable trade terms with certain countries can make importing financially advantageous. It's not about need. It's about this relationship. Quality variations. Some imported TP might be different qualities or features that appeal to certain consumer segments. So that's very similar to the market segmentation. Supply chain diversification. Importing will help ensure a steady supply, even if domestic production faces issues. So again, it's about making sure that the shelves are empty, ironically. Consumer preferences. Some people prefer international brands or products, and then the economies of scales. You've got large scale production in some countries that can lead to cost efficiencies that make importing really viable. And then last but not least, the specialization. While the US produces a lot of TP, it might specialize in certain types while importing others. So this situation reflects the complexities of global trade. I'd say trade agreements are the number one reason for us exporting things that we produce so much of. It's all trade agreements, and it's not the kind that we really want to talk about either, because it'll just make us mad. Factors beyond simple production capability are going to influence those import and export patterns. It's a reminder that trade flows are determined by a mix of economic and strategic and consumer-driven factors. Okay, let's talk about fresh produce, and then I'm gonna be done here. Fresh produce, a lot of that's going to come from South America, though much still comes from Mexico. So we'll be okay on that, which is coming from Mexico. So the items are going to be selective, like bananas. We're going to start hearing the joke, yes, we have no bananas. When I was at Costco yesterday, there wasn't even a pallet of bananas. So people are getting wise to the strike because they're all watching my videos, right? Cherries are going to be impacted as well. Asparagus, things that I had on that list. I looked at Costco labels yesterday, and I was relieved to see so many of them were produced in the US, like the onions and the celery and carrots and things like that. I was really relieved to see that all this is produced in the US. We'll be okay. We still may have surges in costs though, because now the trucks are going to be in higher demand, because some imports will be diverted to the West. So regardless of how wise that is, regardless of the logistics being set up for it, the fact we don't have warehouses set up for it, the fact that we don't have the highway space set up for all the trucks going over there. If you feel a shift, if you feel like you're walking, on an angle during the day, that's wise, because everything's heading over to the West. Anyway, so you should be okay with fresh produce, other than those things that are just going to be, they're perishable. You can't stock up on them. And that's another thing somebody said yesterday. No, we have people that stocked up on this in preparation for this. You can't stock up on shrimp. You can't. So if you find that your jambalaya is no longer available at your favorite restaurant, there's a reason for that. I know that I'm going to go out and get some cherry pie filling, because it occurred to me I need that for my wonderful chocolate covered cherry cake. That I'll be doing a video on here as soon as the cookbook comes out. So just little things like that. I'm thinking, oh yeah, I need more cherry pie filling. So anywho, just think about these facts that I shared with you. It does make an impact. There's no reason for the panic buying of the toilet paper though. There will be some impact, but certainly not enough for panic. I do understand though the fears of people, but I don't understand the name calling of people who are fearful. I just don't think that that's okay. And I certainly hope that you will be peaceful in your preparedness efforts, and that all will be well. Take care. Bye-bye.